Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our Bizarre and Unusual World, where we talk about all things strange, unusual, wild, mystical, and odd. Now that could be true crime, supernatural topics, urban legends, myths, or just things that are plain weird. Today we will be talking all about the Windigo. So let's start out with the what. What exactly is a Windigo? So the history, the myth, legend, or story surrounding this creature does vary depending on the culture behind it, the location you're talking about. But in the Algonquian folklore, a Windigo is basically a man-eating monster and potentially an evil spirit. Now, sometimes this creature has gone by a couple different names, all very similar to the Windigo, but just alternate versions depending on the backstory or the culture you're talking about. This, of course, includes Windigo, Wittigo, Wittico, and Weetigo. But each of them was basically translated to the evil spirit that devours mankind. Now, the shape and characteristics of this creature also change depending on which legend you're talking about. In some of them, it will be a monster of some kind, but still hold on to some of those human traits. I have seen some artwork that actually depicts a Windigo kind of like a Sasquatch, but much bigger and a little scarier in form. Maybe even a werewolf type looking creature, although most reports say that this being is 10 to 15 feet tall, so it is much bigger than your standard Bigfoot or werewolf. Other versions of this will talk about it having horns off the top of its head, kind of like antlers, that would resemble certain demons or demonic beings. That kind of ties in with the evil spirit part of the Windigo. More gruesome descriptions of this creature says that the skin would be tight against its bones because it's just like so skinny and almost decaying. The look of its face and the skin tone would remind everyone of death, with of course hints of blood or like torn flesh, reminding the storytellers of this Windigo creature basically coming back from death. Some stories of the Windigo also mentions glowing eyes, a long tongue, and like razor sharp teeth. But once again, it's really going to depend on which legend you're talking about for how the Windigo is described. Because there's also versions of this story where the Windigo would appear as more of like a possessed human. So yes, they would in a way be monstrous, but they would look like a human that's possessed by this evil Windigo spirit. Throughout history, the Windigo is described and related to a couple different traits. These different things, or sins you could say, are murder, greed, gluttony, and it's often described as a malevolent, cannibalistic, and of course, more of a supernatural being. Now, oftentimes the tale of the Windigo would relate to times of struggle, perhaps during the colder winter months when food is hard to come by and you are facing things like starvation or famine, and in some cases, people would resort to cannibalistic tendencies. That very much ties into the lore of the Windigo. One popular story is the tale of a hunter stuck out in the cold, and when he turned to human flesh to survive, he was cursed into becoming a Windigo. These creatures are also described as never full. They are constantly looking for new victims because whatever sensation or greed or gluttony sin that they feel they have to get, they're never full. They're always out looking. Now, in some versions, the human would turn into a Windigo, whether that be because of their actions, so you could kind of see it as a curse for something that they have done, or, just like a magic spell or something to that effect that would turn a human into a Windigo, but it's very related to, like, almost the curse because of that specific person's actions. That part of the myth was very much a warning to people to not give in to gluttony or greed or murder in some cases. It was very much a warning to people to keep a steady mind and make sure that they were living the life how they should, not taking advantage of others, and if not, you could be cursed into this horrific creature that had in fact given in to those specific sins or had done something so horrendous that they were cursed to become a Wendigo. There's also some tales that suggest that a Wendigo would have some supernatural powers, you could say. Speed has been one of them. The climate does not seem to affect these creatures because, as I said, a lot of these tales happen or related to the cold winter months where people are struggling. There's also stories about how the Wendigo could perhaps mimic a human's voice to lure prey further into the woods or out into the cold. So there's different, powers or supernatural abilities that are sometimes related to this creature depending on the legend you're reading. And when the Wendigo is referencing more of a human possession, it's often suggested that the Wendigo spirit starts to drive the human crazy. This could be with nightmares or visions before the evil spirit fully takes over the human body and is in complete control. As for the who and where of this legend, who exactly passes on these stories, these myths, this creature tale, if you will, and where exactly is it located? The Wendigo is most often recognized from places such as the forest of the Atlantic coast, Great Lakes area within the United States, and different parts of Canada as well. Pretty much, if you are in a warmer climate, you're safe from the Wendigo because the Wendigo is always related to colder nights, snow even. If you're in a warm, little, relaxing tropical feel, you're good. Different tribes do share the story of the Wendigo, but of course they do vary depending on what specific group of people you are talking about. Some of these people include the Ojibwe, the Saltokes, the Cree, the Naskapi, and the Innu people are just some of the tribes that kind of relate the Wendigo to some of their legends. Now, among some of these tribes' ceremonies, the Wendigo would once more relate to a warning to the people to act correctly and not fall victim to the Wendigo curse. The ceremony has been known as this lovely word that I'm going to place on the screen because there's no way I can say it without butchering the name. This ceremony was performed in the dead of winter, of course, when people and tribes would be struggling with famine or starvation, as just once more a reminder to not give in to this Wendigo evil spirit. Some of these ceremonies may include wearing masks or dancing around to the beat of a drum, just as a reminder to everyone to take the Wendigo seriously. Now, an example of when a Wendigo event or a Wendigo psychosis presents itself goes back to around 1878. This version of the tale relates to a human being possessed by that evil spirit and because of lack of food during the winter resulting to cannibalism. The story is described as a Plains Cree tribe trapper from Alberta. With his family dying of starvation and emergency food supply being about 25 miles away, the man decided to butcher and eat his wife and 5 children. Now, they came to the conclusion that this case of cannibalism was not simply just because of starvation, because he was in the distance towards an emergency food supply. So they then related it to the Wendigo psychosis. And he was actually later executed after admitting to the crime. The creature also allegedly made some appearances in northern Minnesota from the 1800s to about 1920s. There's varying reports. As time moved into the 20th century, reports on seeing the Wendigo or experiencing the Wendigo evil spirit did lessen, and a lot of people relate that to integrating more European ideologies. There was actually a famous Wendigo hunter that was an Indian man from the Cree tribe, and his name was Jack Fiddler. In his hunting career, he claims to have killed at least 14 Wendigos. Although the final kill and or murder actually got him thrown in jail. He was 87 years old at the time in October 1907, and he and his son or brother Joseph, there's actually conflicting reports on that, they were both tried for the murder of a Cree Indian woman. They admitted to the crime, but their defense was she was possessed by an evil spirit, that evil spirit of course being the Windigo, and that they were trying to help protect the rest of the tribe so that she didn't go on a mad killing and or eating spree. So how is the Windigo referenced today? Actually, the term Windigo is used in psychology. Psychologists will use this as a term when they're relating it to someone that has a craving for human flesh, or someone that may even have the fear of becoming a cannibal. Not so much the being possessed by an evil spirit side of things, but it is related in psychology today. Other people will also relate the Windigo psychosis to people in modern day that are consumed by greed. They will step all over anyone to get what they want. All they want is their greediness and their gluttony, and they'll do anything and step over anyone to get what they want. And it has nothing to do with being a supernatural creature. Just the Windigo psychosis is sometimes used to describe these people. I also found this part very interesting about the whole idea of a Windigo. Native Americans also understand the Windigo conceptually. As a concept, the Windigo can apply to any person, idea, infected by a coercive drive towards self-aggrandizing greed and excess consumption, traits that sow disharmony and destruction if left unchecked. That really wouldn't relate to the idea of a monster or of an evil spirit, just instead the idea to keep yourself in check and look after your actions and not to be overly greedy in your life. We also have the Windigo referenced in some books. Algernon Blackwoods wrote a short story in 1910 titled The Windigo, and that specific horror story has actually influenced a few other authors. August Derleth actually wrote something called Thing That Walked in the Wind from 1933, which is actually also said to have inspired Stephen King for Pet Sematary. The Windigo also has made its appearance in Marvel Comics. It is also in movies and TV shows. Things like Supernatural, Blood Ties, Charmed, and Grimm. Charmed was probably one of the first references I ever heard the term Windigo, and its version of the story was very much if you come into contact with the Windigo and you are scratched by it or, influenced by it, then you become a Windigo yourself, all while the Windigo is like eating hearts to survive. So it does have like that cannibalistic aspect to it, not so much an evil spirit or curse, because it was more like a scratch and then you become a Windigo. And lastly, why? Why are legends like this continued to be passed on through generations after generations? There's always going to be a few factors to take into consideration when you look at legends like this. One, I think it's a great representation, the tribes showing and reminding their people to not give in to greed and gluttony. Or on the other side of things, if something horrible happens, like a man eating his whole family in the dead of winter, sometimes people want to have another excuse. They don't just want to say that this man went crazy and resulted to cannibalism. No, let's instead blame it on an evil spirit or a monstrous creature like the Windigo who took over the man's conscience, and that's why he murdered his family. Sometimes people need excuses or stories like that to continue on because they can't exactly take the truth of it. Like all myths and legends, the Windigo does have a really impactful story behind it. Whether you believe the monster creature of it or the evil spirit possessing humans, whatever side of it, it does have a very impactful message to it. So, what do you guys think about the Windigo legend, mythology, story, if you will? Have you guys heard of the Windigo before? What are your thoughts on it? Do you believe in the Windigo spirit? Even if you don't believe in like the supernatural aspect of it, the Windigo psychosis is definitely something that you see in modern times. We live in a world where greed is a huge factor in all of our lives. We see it probably daily. So I think all of us know someone affected by the Windigo psychosis. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.